Ever since I started uploading on this channel and slowly built a following discussing movies and TV, I feel like I haven't really had an opportunity to express fully what I want my vision for this channel to be, what's intrigued me the most about cinema, why it's profoundly changed my life, and what I find value in discussing and what I want to talk about moving forward. So I'm going to use this video to tell you guys about some of the movies that absolutely changed my life and have made me the human that I am today. Because from this point of the movies that shaped me and made me who I am, I feel like I can more comfortably expand my content and really try to get the messages across that I'm so passionate about.
Look, you're my best friend, so don't take this the wrong way. But in 20 years, if you're still living here, coming over my house to watch the Patriots game, still working construction, I'll fucking kill you.
Why would God give me a gift to paint ugly and disturbing things?
So you believe that God gave you this gift because he wants to keep you in misery?
And don't forget, I'm also just a girl standing in front of a boy, asking him to love her.
That car down there has moved so much. Like it was built in a factory, you know, like on a production line, and then it was like shipped, like here.
And like then this guy drove it all over the place.
Yeah, exactly. But all that time, like for years or for like, I mean, really for like decades, really, this one tree has just been sitting in this one place, not doing anything until tonight when it like stopped the car.
It's that thing when you're with someone and you love them and they know it and they love you and you know it, but it's a party and you're both talking to other people and you're laughing and shining and you look across the room and catch each other's eyes.
None of it is real. The critics aren't real. The customers aren't real. Because this isn't real.
I don't think you have any idea what you're doing to them.
I'm saving their lives. That's what I'm doing.
Ben, you sound so ridiculous.
What? When are we gonna get an audience in here? It's been 17 years.
Dying broke and drunk and full of heroin at the age of 34 is not exactly my idea of success.
I'd rather die drunk, broke at 34 and have people at a dinner table talk about me than live to be rich and sober at 90 and nobody remember who I was.
Vilket lever vidare konstminne. Jag bara lever vidare I lägenheten.
My vision for this channel is for it to be a place where I can express myself creatively and dive into some deep questions concerning the meaning of life, the universe, and our place within it. These questions and concepts have been with me my entire life, but I genuinely believe cinema is what's allowed me to not only learn about them, but then discuss these concepts with other people that resonate on the same level and also understand what it's trying to say about life. I'm much less concerned with plots and technical achievements and more so the human aspects of film and what themes and moral questions are being explored through the movie and through the character's arc. Over the years, I've been refining my taste and really understanding what connects with me and what types of movies I love and why. And what I've learned is that I'm drawn to the stories that depict the beauty in this world and the regular people in it. Although I do have interests and questions that are more cosmic, I seem to learn more about life and our place in the universe through these seemingly simple movies than anything on another planet or in a different dimension. I believe there's a deep beauty in the intricacies and complexity of everyday life and our interactions we have on a daily basis. Each human being is millions, if not billions, of little life experiences, biases, contradictions, life circumstances, and all of those little minute details shape the worldview of every single person. There are certain films that give me these brief glimpses into the way I feel about the human condition, and when I see that portrayed in a movie, it just hits me so hard. I find that these films that are considered artsy or slow or experimental touch on something about the human experience that the more traditional movies often lack, and that is nuance. That's not to say I dislike any more traditional or mainstream movies, because if you've watched any of my content, you know that there's quite a few that I really love. But from the beginning, and even still, I do believe that there's something in these films that I'm referring to that are a little more niche. They're less mainstream. They're not going to appeal to everybody. There's something in these films that feels more nuanced and ultimately more real to me. That's obviously one of my own personal preferences and biases. I love things that feel so ultra real. And that comes back to my love for the regular world and regular life. I think there's a beauty in that in and of itself, and that we don't really need, at least in my opinion. I don't care for otherworldly things in movies. And ultimately what I'm trying to get at with all of this is that I have a passion for a lot of movies that nobody's ever heard of, and I think that's a shame, because I genuinely believe if more people would allow certain films to take them on a journey that might feel a little weird, it might not make sense in the moment, but if you allow yourself, if you give yourself up to these weird movies or artsy movies, oftentimes you can come out the other side learning things about yourself or about life that you really wouldn't have reflected on or thought of otherwise. At least that's my personal life experience with cinema so far. Like I said, I still want to discuss the trending new movies, of course, but I also want to just expand a little bit and try some other shit. First, I gotta start with Good Will Hunting. I don't know if anything will ever top that movie for me, because watching that movie is what really made me fall in love with the art of cinema and just the beauty in a well-written conversation and the power of a strong monologue. Because as a lot of you who have watched my videos know, I was really late to the game in terms of watching film and understanding film. Like growing up all through middle school and high school, my family was never really into technology or entertainment really in general. All my family was really into is sports, and so I missed so many movies growing up that were undeniable classics, but I hadn't even heard of them. My family didn't even care about any stuff like that. And so to finally, at the age of 19 or 20, watch Good Will Hunting, it just really changed my perspective on what film was all about and what it could actually do to someone. I had never had a moment where I felt like a movie scene changed the way I viewed myself, but Good Will Hunting did in multiple ways. The famous "It's Not Your Fault" scene really sparked my interest in psychotherapy, understanding why we think the way we think. It's not your fault. Just this idea that the way someone else can view you is totally different than the way you view yourself. And as a viewer, depending on how the director crafts this movie, you often get insight into the objective reality of a person while also experiencing their subjective feelings towards themselves, if that makes sense. Like, it opened my eyes to the fact that a director can allow the viewer to be this omniscient being who can kind of understand everything of what's going on, even if the character, the lead character, doesn't really see that yet, and you get to witness them go on this journey and have a character arc. I mean, that's kind of the whole idea of a character arc. This character starts in a particular spot, whether that be physically or mentally, and you get to witness them go through different life events, and if it's a good story, ideally that character goes on an arc and ends up different than they were at the start. And I actually heard that stuff. I took a couple film classes in college and I understood that, but Good Will Hunting was the first time where I was just blown away at how a director could make me feel and think about life. There's also another scene where Ben Affleck's character says,
"You don't owe it to yourself. You owe it to me."
And that probably was and still is my favorite monologue or back and forth conversation of all time. It was one of the first scenes in a super depressing movie that actually made me cry. I think it hit me so hard because there's been multiple times in my life where I felt like either myself or the people in my life, like close loved ones, weren't living up to their full potential for one reason or another. And, you know, as a loved one, it sucks when you feel like somebody else could be doing so much more, so much better, and they don't even see it for themselves, or they don't see why they should be doing that. And as I've gotten older and rewatched the films at different points in my life, that scene hits me in like different contexts, because more recently I felt that towards myself actually. And this whole idea of having a natural God-given gift and not really doing your best to capitalize on that is kind of doing a disservice to not only yourself, but the people around you who aren't as fortunate. And that's an idea I've grappled with. And I think a lot of people can relate to that. Like, what if you have a talent or a skill that you don't love at all, but you're really, really good at it? Is it your duty to do it anyway and to capitalize on that skill because other people would be so lucky to have that? And I'm not trying to guide people to think one way or another. I'm just saying this film really makes you explore that question thoughtfully, and I love that. All right, next up is Memento. Normally when people ask me what are your favorite movies, Good Will Hunting and Memento are always tossed out first, because Memento just totally reshaped what a movie could be in my mind. Like I said, 5 or 6 years ago, I hadn't seen that many movies. And so when I sat down and watched Memento, the way that it plays with storytelling, and it's non-linear, and some things are in the past and some are in the present and some are going backwards and some are going forwards in time. Like, as I learned later, Christopher Nolan is kind of known for that, the way he portrays time in film. But at the time when I first watched Memento, I was just dumbfounded. I was like, oh my God, this is incredible. I could watch this 7 times and pick up on new details every time. And I have, and it's awesome. So for that one reason, Memento holds a special place in my heart. I totally understand when people say like it's not their favorite Nolan movie or whatever, but for me, it's just the best example of someone messing with the form, the traditional form of a story or like a hero's journey. Like, it doesn't always have to be that way. It doesn't have to follow the same formula that a lot of other successful movies do. And that was so cool to me, and honestly really inspiring, that you can make something in a way that's a little untraditional, and it might be a little harder, but if done right, it can work well and appeal to a lot of people. Next up, we got to talk about Captain Fantastic. I have made a whole video on this topic. I recommend going and checking it out because I'm really proud of that video. But this was one of the first films that I saw that touched on some really deep existential philosophy that I didn't even know I was interested in until watching this. And afterwards, my life has literally been different ever since. Like, middle school and high school John was not contemplating our existence in the universe or how to define meaning in the modern world or what is the right way to live. I was just indoctrinated into modern Western Pacific Northwest culture in America, and I hadn't really considered alternate ways of living. And I can confidently say that Captain Fantastic is what kind of sparked my disgust for this sort of rat race culture where, not all the time, but oftentimes it feels like a lot of people are unhappy, a lot of people don't like what they do, they don't know what they want to do, they don't know how to find meaning in the world. At least those are the sort of feelings I struggle with for years now. But I just adore the way the father character interacts with his children, and he treats them like adults, and he educates them on topics that some parents might think are weird or unnecessary, but in my opinion, teaching kids philosophy like that would fundamentally change like a whole generation. Like, I really do believe that if kids had to take philosophy classes like every year through middle school and high school, I think that could have a big impact on the worldview of a whole generation. But hey, what do I know? I just ultimately loved the way the father treated his children, and the first time after watching it, I thought to myself, I want to be like that guy when I'm older. Like, I want to be this open-minded, educated, articulate, but also fiercely independent man that has strong wills and strong beliefs and can defend them in a conversation, even if you don't agree. I will say, after multiple viewings and as I've gotten older, I've started to acknowledge some of the poor parenting decisions and blind spots that the father character has in the movie. But even still, I do think at his core, that father is a great person. And I felt that given the way the movie ends, you get to see that he really is a good person. And I don't know, I love that movie. Go watch it. Number 4 is Whiplash. It really wears its themes on its sleeve. It's ultimately a movie about the struggles for greatness and the prices that people are willing to pay in order to succeed, and what we believe we need to endure in order to succeed. And I think it presents a lot of interesting questions about what is success and what is worth it for success. And I watched this film at a point in my life when I had a coach that made me feel terrible about myself the same way that J.K. Simmons' character in this movie is just the most evil and manipulative coach or leader. And so I really resonated with Miles Teller's character in this film. But what's really interesting to me is that as I've gotten older, as I rewatch this movie, I take away different lessons from it. And a big part of my perspective on how I view success and suffering for success, and do we need to endure pain in order to be successful, a lot of that has changed drastically since I've gotten older and since I first watched the movie. I feel like the first time I watched it, the message that I took away from it, which I don't really know if it's the right message to get from this, is that in order to succeed, suffering is inevitable, and that you can't be fully comfortable if you want to be one of the greats or one of the greatest of all times. You have to be challenging and pushing yourself all the time, pushing basically past your limit. And if you do that, you'll often find that your limit is probably further than you thought. And while I still agree with that sentiment, I've learned after years of a lot of negative self-talk in my head and kind of like self-imposed suffering for the sake of just suffering, sort of, it's not fucking worth it, dude. In my life, there was habits I used to have where I would force myself to do things every day, very regimented. Against all logic, I would just grind through certain things. And while in some ways I do see the benefit to things like that, I think ultimately, for me personally, it's just led to an unnecessary amount of stress that is not worth the gain. And I think maybe for some people, at least for myself, I think I had to learn that the hard way and the long way. I don't think anybody could have told me at the time that like, oh, hey, John, I know you really like that movie, but like, you don't need to like make things intentionally terrible in order to succeed, and that sometimes some of success is just luck. And sometimes you could work really, 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 really hard and still not get the result you want. And sometimes it's not even your own fault. As I've matured, those are the sorts of things that have come into my mind. So now when I watch the movie, I kind of appreciate it, but in a different way. Next up is Synecdoche, New York, which I'll be honest, I've only watched it one time, and that was quite a few years ago. So I'm not going to talk a whole lot about it here because it is a lot. But this was my entry to films that are so esoteric and so like just weird. But if you allow this movie to take you on its journey, if you kind of give up all preconceived notions of like what a movie should be or how it should feel, if you just go into it and let it do its thing to you, I think it's pretty profound. And I think a lot of people who watched it would agree with that statement, that like it just really is perfect in my opinion. I think what Charlie Kaufman was trying to portray in that film, it could not be more intricate, but also more perfect. Like, it's so complicated, it really blurs the lines between reality and art. And I think it's beautiful and complicated, and it could be analyzed and interpreted for decades and you would never get to like everything that he was trying to portray. So for that reason, I loved it, and I still think about it to this day. Lastly, here we have two films that are somewhat similar in some ways and that have both come out in the last couple of years, and that would be The Worst Person in the World and Hannah Ha Ha. Now, most of you have probably never heard of Hannah Ha Ha, and I'll get into that one in a second. But first, let's talk about The Worst Person in the World. So over the last couple years in particular, my passion for the art of cinema and analyzing film has really skyrocketed. I used to just like movies and find them fun, and I loved going through and watching all the ones I had missed in my childhood and kind of catching up with everybody. But now I appreciate it on a whole new level, where I'm really seeking films that push the boundary of what I've seen or really resonate with me on a level that most movies don't. Like something that really just itches that part of my brain that loves the beauty and the simple things in life. And The Worst Person in the World came into my life at the perfect time. For years, I've always said like, oh, I don't want to make movies. I just like talking about them and analyzing them. And as I've gotten older and matured, I do wonder if maybe one day I want to try to make a movie. I don't know. I think maybe it's just fear or like doubt on whether or not I could do it. Or I just don't know if that's really my thing in general. Like, I don't know if that's what I want to do. But regardless, I can confidently say if I ever were to make a movie, I would want it to be like Joachim Trier's. I definitely didn't say his name right, but I think it's like Joachim Trier, something like that. I'm sorry, I'm definitely fucking it up. But I watched that movie, and as soon as it ended, I just decided like that is the best portrayal of what I find to be incredible. To say that I related to Julie, the main character, would be an understatement. I resonated with her so deeply. Her unwillingness to conform to a life she doesn't want, her indecision about what she wants for her future, her desire to pause time and delay all the major life decisions for a while, and her longing to just live in the moment. It focuses on the nuance and complexity of love in your early adult life and how messy and exciting things can get. And the thing that I absolutely adore about this movie is just how complex and nuanced the characters are. Every character in this movie is ambiguous. You don't really know how you're supposed to feel about any of them, and it just felt so real. Like, so often it feels like the director is kind of guiding you towards their vision, or they want you to feel a certain way about a particular person and their beliefs in the movie, which I totally understand. I mean, that's part of the beauty of film, is that certain directors have a very specific vision and can take you on this journey so that you experience their vision. But then there's a lot more films that are closer to realism as opposed to like classicism, or what's the other one? I forget. But the main character, Julie, her boyfriends, her parents, all of her acquaintances, they all had really layered personalities, forcing you to constantly reevaluate what you think of each of them. I totally understand how that could be infuriating to some people, never getting a solid answer, but I kind of love it. So I just have to talk about this movie every chance I get. I think it's perfect, and I highly recommend you go watch it. And finally, the movie that you have not heard of yet. I hope that one day Hannah Ha Ha will be a big name or make a pretty big run. I know that it's currently still going through the film festival circuit. I saw it this most recent year at the Seattle International Film Festival, and it was a really amazing experience because not only was the movie so incredible and resonated with me on such a deep existential level, but also the director was there and I happened to sit right next to him without knowing it, and then he did a whole Q&A after the movie and I talked to him after. So shout out to Jordan Tatuski. I hope I said that right, but he's really talented, and if you get a chance to see this movie, please go see it. Just add it to your watch list because maybe one day you could see it in a theater or on streaming somewhere. I won't get too much into it here in this video, but Hannah Ha Ha follows this girl named Hannah who is at a point in her life that I connected with a lot because she's kind of questioning everything. Some of the questions proposed in this movie are, what are we supposed to do if we reject the notion that everybody needs a job? What does it look like to genuinely place our happiness above all else? And who decides what even constitutes a meaningful life? And on the surface, you could easily snap back with like quick responses to all of those questions without putting much thought into it. But in my opinion, the movie explores these ideas in a way that is really thoughtful. It's so good. It's so good. There's this one line where Hannah's older brother is in town and he's basically trying to encourage her to get like a regular job. And, you know, he's in the corporate world, he's making a good salary and he's doing the thing, you know, like he's doing the thing that Americans are advised to do, where you go to school, you go to college or whatever, you get a degree, or maybe you don't get a degree, but you kind of work your way up and you work your day job. And for a lot of people, for a large percentage of people, that's kind of the route you take in America. And he's trying to get her to get ambitious and to kind of start a career because she's 26 now. And he says something to her about how most 26-year-olds are already making strides in their career. And Hannah responds with something along the lines of, no, I think that's just you and your friends. And the line was so simple and it was hilarious, but it also touches on something so deep, and that is that some people are so wrapped up in their own way of life that they literally can't comprehend how somebody might not desire or value the same sort of lifestyle that they have. And that's an idea that has always infuriated me, when people have a certain way of life or place their value in certain things, and then somebody is like, oh, that's weird, or that doesn't make any sense. It's like, yeah, it doesn't make any fucking sense to you because you haven't had any of their life experience. You literally know nothing about what this person thinks or values. And then you're making a judgment that like what they're doing is weird, when maybe your life is fucking weird. And maybe working your way up a corporate ladder and like sitting in this office with fluorescent light for like 30 years or more, maybe you find that repulsive. And like, I get it, dude. I get it. I've always thought about that. But like, I think a lot of people can resonate with that idea, but like nobody knows how to get out of it. Like a lot of my friends and family would agree that like, oh, the corporate ladder life is like not the greatest and probably not the most meaningful for a lot of people. Not for everybody. Like, some people might really love that structure, but everybody's in it though, and nobody knows how to get out. Like, not everybody can be an entrepreneur and like be their own boss and start their own business. And so I think questions like that are kind of hard for people to process and to really think about, because I don't know what the answer is, and the movie doesn't really give you a solid answer either. But I think that's what's so beautiful about it, is that everybody's going to take away different things from it, learn different things about themselves and about life, and I think that's great. Wow. That was a lot, but that was really fun.